Okay, hi everybody, we'll get started. Hi everybody, I'm Jerry McHugh Jr., President of San Juan Resources. Good morning, listeners and attendees. We've got a special guest and a special topic for today's Improving Our San Juan IQ. Kathleen Sgamma is here with us, President of Western Energy Alliance. Today's discussion is on the San Juan Basin and how it's looking to be affected by this month's general election results. With a huge amount of New Mexico federal land, 80% plus of the San Juan is federal, thought this would be a worthy topic. And I will share a bit of the screen right here of what the federal land looks like in New Mexico. This is the San Juan Basin. I say 80%. I mean, a lot of these are going to be federal minerals in here, and a lot of the forests, this is all going to be federal too. But you see the yellow is going to be federal surface. Orange is Indian land or allottees. A lot of allottees over here, and then the Navajo reservations here. So the San Juan Basin essentially goes like this up into Colorado too. So I say 80%. I think that's a good ballpark figure to look at there. As you'd seen on the invite, I'd invited the Bureau of Land Management guests to contribute to the conversation. One from the San Juan Field Office in Farmington. He's an assistant with fluids and minerals, and a BLM New Mexico State Office lease coordinator representative. I was wanting to get their views, perspectives, and basically talk BLM shop. But they were able to join us today, not unable to join us today. So this is what we have here with Kathleen. More importantly, this means we've got more time with our guest Kathleen in this topic. Notice in a disclaimer, I've been a member of the Western Energy Alliance for 25 plus years, back when the Alliance was called the Independent Petroleum Association of Mountain States. I'm also a member of the Independent Petroleum Association of New Mexico. So again, welcome everybody, and a big thanks for joining today. I know your time is valuable. This is our 7th San Juan IQ, and I wanted to share with you where you can go if you want to look to see some of these broadcasts. You can go to our website here at sanjuanbasin.com. There's a little icon here showing the past 50 years production in the San Juan Basin, which shows the little icon you can hit, and it'll take you to where these are located here on the website. And you can see in May we had 40-year perspective, my perspective of the San Juan, and these are all on video. June was looking around the curve with Jason Sandell and Dr. Dan Fine. Then we had natural gas market dynamics with Sam Rasher. We had an independence panel in August. And September, October were really focused geological and technical engineering discussions on the huge San Juan Mancos gas potential. And then we had Mancos crude, huge potential there, and what some of the Lagos and DJR are doing, and then my company, San Juan Resources. So I just thought I'd point you to that on the screen. And so I've known Kathleen for over 15 years, probably when you first came to the association. We'd gotten to know each other better in the Washington call-ups I went to. I think I went to 3 or 4 of them in 2008 through 11, somewhere in there. And that's where we're independent producers head across the U.S. Capitol and visit with senators, representatives, or their staffs, and talk up the domestic oil and gas industry. Essentially, we advocate to the Congress about who we are. One of the best things of the Alliance is we don't just get to talk with our political friends on these call-ups, but we reach across the other side of the spectrum, and we speak with obviously more liberal and progressive offices. Essentially, I call it putting a drop of time in the bucket, a drop of water at a time in the bucket when we speak with these people as we tell them about our industry. So it's a slow process, but it's a lot of fun. And hope you don't mind promoting this for the Alliance, Kathleen. But anyways, so we hopped in and out of cabs in DC, and we've been in the trenches on those trips, which the Alliance still sets up. So for Kathleen's bio, let me go over it here real quick. She joined the Alliance in March of 2006. Prior to joining the Western Energy Alliance, she spent 11 years in the information technology sector, including managing the European consulting practice for a software vendor and 3 years as a military intelligence officer in the US Army. She holds a BS in Poli-Sci and Defense and Arms Control Studies from Massachusetts Institute of Technology and has an MS in Information Technology from Virginia Tech. Western Energy Alliance represents 300 member companies engaged in all aspects of environmentally friendly and responsible exploration for oil and natural gas in the West. And they represent independent oil and gas producers, the majority of which are small businesses with an average of 14 employees. And we're keeping that level down over here. We have 3. So before it was IPAMS, I had a question for you. Was IPAMS an offshoot of the Denver-Julesburg Basin Independence? Or am I thinking of something else?
Yeah, not that I know of.
Okay. Anyway, I don't know. I just kind of thought that. So the screen is yours, Kathleen. Take it over from here. And
great. Thanks, Jerry. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me on today. Sorry to scare away your other BLM panelists. And I'm getting a thing saying that I cannot share my screen right now.
let me get it going here just a sec. We went through this earlier too. So
We tested it, but is it repeatable?
okay. Okay, I have to get my, just a sec here, folks. We are not professionals at this, at least I'm not.
All right, well, I will just get started talking while we figure that out, just so we're not wasting people's time. So like Jerry said, I am the president of Western Energy Alliance. We represent oil and natural gas producers and all types of companies engaged in E&P in the San Juan, New Mexico, and all across the West. So we have been doing that since 1974, and it looks like I can share my screen now.
You're good to go.
So there we go. I will be talking about the election and what it means for developing on public lands in the San Juan and across the West. So I already talked about that. You can see the states we cover, all the Western producing states, the Rockies producing states, and we purposefully leave off California. We do represent independents on federal issues, not the state specific issues, but we work closely with IPA New Mexico, NMOGA, all the other state trades. We are based in Denver, but that does not mean we do anything more on Colorado than any of our other states. And in fact, I avoid Colorado rules and regulations like the plague. So we have a different perspective than some other trade associations. We bring that Western regional perspective to Washington, D.C. As Jerry mentioned, we work actively with Congress. We work with policymakers across the whole region. We do try to reach out to the other side, but it's really getting hard. And I'll explain that a little bit more in my presentation as I get into the politics of it. But there are still some Democrats that are conservative or moderate that we do work with. And some like that we just, we're not going to get to Chuck Schumer and Merkley in Oregon, so we don't really waste our time there. But we do work with Joe Manchin in West Virginia, for example, a very moderate Democrat. So we are the tip of the spear when it comes to public lands issues. We do have an outsized media presence because of our little oil aggressive advocacy, which I like to compare to big oil of API. We have a great synergy between API and Western Energy Alliance, and they let us take the lead when it's better to lead forward with little oil. So that's kind of our differentiator. We're a bit more lean and aggressive, and we do since we represent independents and you all are just getting it done out there. And so we're able to do that type of advocacy on your behalf. So I'm going to talk about the election a little bit, and I hope I don't geek out too much, but I do really kind of get into this. So hopefully I will not bore you too much on this, but I do think it's important to take a little bit of a deep dive into the election so that we can see how that election is really going to affect what we're doing on public lands. So first and foremost, the biggest surprise, I mean, we all know what happened with the presidential election. It was tight. The battlegrounds were tight. There's still recounts going on, but we do have a President-elect Biden, and we will work with that new administration coming in. But there are many things that I am very positive about. First thing is, my little chart here is from the Cook Political Report, and they're one of the few prognosticators that I really trust. And now, we all know that the polls were absolutely, I had to restrain myself in what I wanted to say about the polling there, but the polling was just completely off. So Cook does rely on polling. I think they're, better prognosticators than others because they know how to look at polls and separate the good from the bad. But even the good polls this cycle around were completely off. I don't know what the polling community does going forward. It's not my problem, but it's clear that they were dealing with the shy Trump voter, and they were dealing with Republicans, conservatives that just don't trust the media and kind of think of polling as an extension of the media. So they clearly were not talking to the media, and polls were off, not by the usual margin of error by 3 to 4 percentage points, but by 8, 9, 10, in some cases even higher. They were off by what the actual election results were. So my little chart here from Cook is interesting because I always look at the toss-up election or races in any house when we're looking at Congress, the House of Representatives. I always look at the toss-ups. The lean Republican, lean Dem, very rarely do those flip one way or the other. If something's labeled as lean Democrat, the Democrats almost always pick it up. Same thing on the Republican side. And then the likely Democrat and Republican, I mean, I barely even look at those categories because they almost never flip. And this does not include all of the races that are so solid, Republican or Democrat, that they don't even make the chart as considered competitive. But really looking right here at all the toss-ups right in the middle, every single one you see with the red arrow went for Republicans. The polling all suggested that Democrats were going to increase their lead in the House. And actually, that it's very narrow now. I know most of you know that, but it's just really incredible to me that all of the toss-ups have gone to Republicans. There are a few races outstanding. Most of those have Republicans in the lead from as little as 50 votes to a couple of thousand. So there are about 5 races that haven't been called yet, but most of those look like they will be going to Republicans. So what does that mean for you in the San Juan and for us in the San Juan and across the whole West? With a House that's probably going to end up somewhere in the 222 to 214, razor thin majority for the Democrats. That means that it is going to be a very huge force for moderation. I know we saw the media cycle last week, which was the far left pushing on the Democrats and blaming them moderates, and moderates were blaming the far left. And it's, there's that in the news cycle. But the bottom line is Nancy Pelosi knows that her razor thin margin depends on moderation, because the far left lost several seats, and they didn't lose them for the AOCs. They kept their seats because they're in safe seats, but they lost those moderate districts that had a Republican or had a Democrat that, was in an area that voted for Trump, for example. Those we're losing moderates in the middle, left and right. So the House being this razor thin means that we have a great lever of moderation when it comes to just about any issue that is going to affect this industry. So from, the Green New Deal or net zero emissions, there's just not a mandate from this election for that type of policy, those radical policies. So we will see those types of bills certainly be introduced. The House introduces hundreds, if not thousands of bills every Congress, every 2 years. They introduce hundreds and thousands of bills that never pass. So those will be introduced, but they just won't go there. Nancy Pelosi does not want to lose her majority in 2022. Now, I think she's going to, no matter what happens, because Americans like divided government, and the Biden administration is going to push to the left on certain things enough to drop some more races in the midterm election. That's what's going to happen. But in the meantime, we have a real source of moderation in the House of Representatives. Now, I know that you all know that the House or the Senate is very evenly split. It is not going to be a 50-50 split. The Republicans are going to pick up those 2 seats in Georgia, and it will be a 51-50 majority, or 52-48 majority for the Republicans. So again, razor thin. So things aren't going to advance in the Senate either. It's going to be the same that we've seen now almost for 10 years, where things just don't move for 10 years. I mean, the House and the Senate have been deeply divided, and things just don't move. That's not getting any better. And that's good in general. That means, again, that radical aspects of the Green New Deal aren't going to pass. Things that do pass and must pass pieces of legislation will be moderate, or, they're just like the Defense Authorization Act, and maybe we can squeak in a few things here and there. And maybe they can squeak in a few things here and there, but we're not going to see a lot going on in the Senate. So I want to just talk about the Senate races, just because it's really interesting and how it relates to Georgia. So my slide here is, how much does it cost to lose a Senate race? Literally, Democrats threw all kinds of money at certain races that just had no chance of flipping. Mitch McConnell, the majority leader in the Senate, is just pleased as punch that they spent $88 million trying to defeat him, and he won by 20 percentage points. It was wasted money. Lindsey Graham in South Carolina there, $114 million was spent by his challenger to lose by 14 points. Montana, I think, was interesting because I thought that was going to be a closer race. $102 million was spent against Senator Daines, and Senator Daines won by 10%. So we're going to see the same kind of, I think the most interesting one was Maine. Everybody thought that Senator Susan Collins was just toast. She wasn't going to win. All the polling was against her, and she won by 9 percentage points. $69 million spent in Maine, $102 million in Montana. These are not expensive media markets, and that was a lot of money to lose by a lot. So what we're going to see is that ain't nothing yet, because the amount of money that's going to be spent in Georgia, I think will, in a short period of time especially, it's going to easily top 100 million. Some people are saying 200 million. But when the balance of power hangs on the Senate on 2 seats, if Democrats can pick up those 2 seats, and then Kamala Harris as the vice president casts the deciding vote, then that 50-50 split in the Senate is a Democrat majority. I just don't see it happening. You have 2 candidates for the Democrats that are just not strong candidates. And again, Democrats have shown that they can throw a lot of money at races that they then lose. So, oh my goodness, I forgot the guy's name already. Pastor
Warnock.
I'm just drawing a blank. Pastor Raphael Warnock, sorry, I forgot his name, he doesn't have any political experience. He doesn't have any business experience. He's basically a pastor. It's now coming out that he said positive things about Reverend Jeremiah Wright, who you may remember from the Obama years, was tied to Obama, and he said, one of his famous lines was not God bless America, God damn America. So that kind of rhetoric is playing out in the ads. I just don't see him winning at all. That these are runoff elections in Georgia, because Georgia has, those jungle primaries, which if you don't reach a majority, then you have to have a runoff. Kelly Loeffler, the appointed senator, that's the current incumbent, she came in second to Warnock, but she faced a stiff challenge on the right from Representative Doug Collins. And so if you add their two totals together, she starts out at 46%, he starts out at 32%. And Georgians, the country, Americans in general, like divided government. I think she wins that race pretty easily. Same thing with Senator David Perdue. He's the incumbent, first term incumbent, and his opponent is John Ossoff, who is lightweight. He has really no experience either in business or politics. He lost a congressional race before. He's just a lightweight. He's a young communications guy, and he has proven he can lose in Georgia before. I just don't see him winning either. David Perdue won the race, but because he didn't quite get to 50%, that goes to a runoff. So I just don't see Georgia. I believe that Republicans will hold the Senate. So that gives us a huge lever of moderation as well. We've narrowed the House, but we have the Senate. So the Senate can hold oversight hearings. The House won't, but the Senate can hold oversight hearings on our issues, on energy issues. The Senate will not advance legislation from the House that is radical. It just won't go anywhere. You've got Senator Manchin in West Virginia, a Democrat who's very conservative, but he's already come out and said he's not going to vote for radical policies. So the Senate remains a source of moderation. And then what was really interesting about this election was how the down ballot races also went Republican. When you look from the top to the bottom, the closeness of the Biden win down to the state legislatures, this was an alignment of a center-right electorate. This was clearly a center-right electorate. The Democrats were hoping to pick up some legislatures in certain states, but they actually lost some. And now the split is 59 Republican houses are controlled, 59 state legislative bodies are controlled by Republicans out of 98 partisan chambers. So right up and down the top of the ballot to the very bottom, moderation for everything. And Nancy Pelosi knows it, Joe Biden knows it. Yes, they have to placate the left wing of their party, but if they want to hold on to any power in 2022 in the House, they will be moderate. So that's all to the good for us. It also means that Republicans are generally doing the redistricting that happens every 10 years. So that can help solidify some majorities for Republicans going forward as well. So that's my theme, moderation. The blue wave that was supposed to happen just didn't happen. And that's why we have several levers that we didn't think we had when we were planning for a Biden presidency. What was also interesting is that our industry turned out to be a force for moderation at the top of the ticket. So we all know that President-elect Biden has made some statements that are fairly anti-oil and gas. He's kind of tiptoed around banning fracking nationwide. Certainly his Vice President-elect Kamala Harris has come out and said ban fracking, but that was before she was on the ticket. So what happened was Biden needed to win Pennsylvania. So he backed off on those no fracking types of comments. But he was very clear that he is going to go after fracking, leasing, permitting on federal lands. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit more depth. But Suffice it to say that with the alignment towards the center right and the fact that the working class tipped decidedly for Trump, and a lot of those energy workers were very positive for Trump. We really had an outsized role in this election. Fracking was a top tier issue in this election to our side, not towards banning fracking. So what does that mean for the San Juan and every producing basin across the West, really? Oh, here's my little slide. I like this slide because this came from Food and Water Action, and they are very radical. They're a very radical environmental group. They're one of the ones that have been really pushing for all the regulation in Colorado, but they're all across the country. And, you know, I hate to say this, but I kind of agree with their slide here. I mean, that's clearly, I agree with their X's and their check marks. Obviously, they're touting that as a bad thing. And of course, that green check mark is very bad for the West. But it is the fact that Biden needs to be realistic to some extent. He needs to be moderate, but he also has to placate his left wing. So he perceives that federal lands are not as politically important to him as, say, fracking in Pennsylvania, a battleground state. He knows that he's never going to get Wyoming, and he's not going to get North Dakota, Montana. So he feels he can kind of sacrifice public land states because, you know, he's got to take it from somewhere. Now, New Mexico and Colorado are a little bit of a different situation, and I'll get to that in a bit. But suffice it to say that we're in a situation where it is going to be, the battle for us in the West is going to be on public lands. So what Western Energy Alliance will be doing is what we did during the Obama administration. We were faced with hundreds of regulatory actions meant, you know, the death by 1,000 cuts, meant to slow down development and leasing on federal lands. And we lived through that, and we can live through it again. We will re-engage our regulatory strategy that is designed to push back on that regulatory overreach when it comes to public lands. But it's going to be a rough couple of years until the midterm election. So we are gearing up for that. So what I see are three possible scenarios. Again, clearly Biden has promised to ban leasing, permitting, fracking on federal lands. Now, an outright ban is probably the easiest scenario for us to handle. A president just doesn't have the power to say no more leasing on federal lands. The Mineral Leasing Act is clear. The Federal Land Policy and Management Act, FLPMA, is clear that oil and natural gas is a primary use of appropriate multi-use lands. So if he tries an outright ban on leasing or an outright ban on permitting, then we, Western Energy Alliance, will be in court the next day. We will be able to get an injunction on that policy, and we will ultimately prevail on the merits of that presidential order. He simply doesn't have the power. That's actually the easiest scenario for us to handle. I think, though, my second scenario is probably more likely, which is he is going to have very smart people from the Clinton Interior Department, from the Obama Interior Department, and these folks know that they don't have the authority to just come out and ban leasing and permitting. They know they don't have that authority. Now, they may do it as a sop to the left, like we tried to ban it, but the court said no. I kind of think that they won't even try to do that. I think they're going to do some type of moratorium on leasing and permitting, whereby they embark on a programmatic oil and gas environmental impact statement that looks at all of the cumulative impacts of oil and natural gas, from direct impacts at the well pad through the midstream, all the way down to the consumer. They want to do a full life cycle analysis on climate change and any other environmental impact. And as we all know, a NEPA document takes years to develop, and they will try to say that in the meantime, no new permitting, no new leasing. And as soon as so it's a little bit harder for us to sue against, because it's not just we're stopping it. And they're going to be saying, well, no, we're not stopping it completely. We're just stopping it until we finish the EIS. And then the EIS takes 3-4 years or whatever. So we still would be successful in court on that, and we will challenge it. But it's just a little bit harder of a litigation to deal with than the outright ban. So we'll have to be looking at companies willing to step forward and say, hey, my permit was denied, or I can't develop on my existing, my valid existing lease rights because they won't give me a permit, or I can't get this lease to, complete my leasehold so I can move forward with my project. So, but again, we, Western Energy Alliance, have litigation that we've put on hold that we can turn on again in those types of scenarios. Whatever happens, whether it's the outright ban or a moratorium, as they, the analysis by paralysis by analysis of doing a programmatic EIS that takes 3, 4, 5 years, whatever scenario they choose, they will do death by 1,000 cuts again. They're going to try to do all types of things that they did before in the Obama administration, plus. So there's the bureaucratic. Boy, Jerry, it's probably good that BLM is not on with me today, because I'm going to talk about the bureaucratic delays that just come by, that just come when, your field office just doesn't want to really move fast on permitting because they know that the top is not going to support them. That political will from the very top is very important, because that filters down. Once field offices got the message from the Trump administration that they would be, pressured if they didn't process permits, the reverse is true. They're going to get that pressure from, oh, hey, why are you processing all these permits so quickly? Did you do this? And they're going to dream up more things to do to slow up that permit. We saw that in the Obama administration. We're going to see that in the Biden administration as well. We're going to see new rulemaking. We're going to see attempts to overturn Trump rules that, those energy dominance Trump rules that help to move forward development on public lands. So again, Western Energy Alliance, we lived through that. We know how to do that. We can turn on that regulatory effort, but it does take a lot of time, effort, and resources. And meanwhile, your permits start to slow down. Same thing with leasing. Suddenly leasing, instead of taking 6 weeks from nomination to sale, it goes back to that 18 weeks or more that we saw under the Obama administration. We did have a lawsuit challenging the Obama administration's failure to hold quarterly lease sales, particularly in New Mexico. We filed that in New Mexico. We did put that on hold when the Trump administration changed that policy. But if we start to see those skipped quarterly leases, we will turn that litigation on again. So we're really kind of positioned well, better than we were at the start of the Obama administration. Certainly we're in what I think is the least bad outcome from the election, because yes, Trump is not president and he was very good for our industry, but with that moderation at every other level of government, I think we're in pretty good shape. So we will move forward with our usual challenging that overregulation. We have, I'd just like to show my little slide. It's not, I don't need to explain it all, but what we're seeing is a real play between more traditional conservative courts and let's face it, California. New Mexico's, your AG, the California AG, and obviously several environmental groups have sued on everything that's come out of the Trump administration. In our case, we've successfully beaten back their challenge to the Trump rescission of the Obama fracking rule. We won that even in the California court. we overturned the Obama venting and flaring rule in the court of Wyoming. So Western Energy Alliance and combined with the Independent Petroleum Association of America have this successful, this is my model. This is our model of we sue in the Wyoming court, the Enviros sue in the California court. We're both really shopping for venue, and we have been able to blunt some of the radical, we've been able to blunt the environmental groups from putting back in place the Obama rules. And so that litigation continues on appeal, but we're on very solid grounds with that. So we will have to do that type of litigation for other rules that we see in the Biden administration as well. But it's not all just suing. We have several tools in our toolkit. I've already mentioned our comprehensive regulatory engagement. We will have a study coming out in the early part of December, which is an economic analysis of what a leasing and a development or a drilling ban or fracking ban, let's call it a leasing and fracking ban on federal lands. It's going to be a state-by-state economic analysis. It is being done by the University of Wyoming. So it's done by a reputable energy economist from the University of Wyoming. And that will be coming out. That will be a great tool for us as we start to explain to policymakers, the general public, stakeholders all across the West, governor's office, what it means to New Mexico's budget, what it means to Wyoming's budget. And so that will be an important tool for us as we fight a Biden leasing or fracking ban or fracking ban. We also have kind of an interesting tool in the Great American Outdoors Act, one of the few pieces of legislation that was passed back in the summer. And that included provisions that take royalties from the development you all do on federal lands, and rather than all of that royalty going straight into the general treasury, a portion of that will go into national parks, so directly into conservation. That was a piece of legislation that Western Energy Alliance helped pass. And what it means is, and the reason we did it, and we had environmental groups very suspicious of us, and they should have been, but they should have figured out my devious nature and why we really supported that, is because once you tie that funding from oil and natural gas directly into conservation, well, if you're going to say you can't have leasing and development on federal lands, you're now taking funding right out of conservation that protects our public lands, fixes our national parks, takes care of that maintenance backlog in national parks and in wildlife refuges. So you can bet that we will be using that tool anytime somebody tries to stop development in the San Juan Basin or anywhere else on federal lands. And then we do have our friends in Congress on the Democrat side as well. Western Energy Alliance helped buttress and form the Democratic Oil and Gas Caucus. It's run by a couple of Democrats in Texas, so oil patch Democrats in Texas, some in California, and then other moderates. And it's a small group, but that group can help to explain to their colleagues on the left why it's important not to move forward with radical policies that stop oil and natural gas development. So those are some of the tools that we will be exercising quite a bit during the Biden administration. And well, I can't help you too much. Colorado, New Mexico, the whole country did not experience a blue wave, but we all did here in Colorado and New Mexico in the last election in 2018. That blue wave, and what I think of as a blue tsunami, really, especially in Colorado, continues. But you do have a governor in New Mexico, at least, not in Colorado, but in New Mexico, who is, looking at her budget, I think a third of which comes from oil and gas at least, and goes, you know what, you really can't ban fracking on federal lands because that's just going to put too much of a hole in my revenue. So New Mexico, certainly, I think we have room to work with. but I know you're suffering from the same type of rulemaking at the state level that we had in Colorado. So anyway, that's my general presentation. I think, Jerry, you wanted to do some more question and answer and dialogue.
Yeah, I had a couple things, and I will reclaim the host.
Great.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Very informative, especially I like the cook report with the colors of the blue and red, and how most everything went on the toss-ups to the Republicans, and then the Republicans also picked up some seats in the lean and positive Democrats. So that was great. Someone sent in a question. Who do you think that Biden's likely Department of Interior nominee for secretary is going to be?
Well, it looks like your New Mexico delegation is high on the list. Tom Udall looks like he's bubbling up to the top. I am working with some Democrats on other alternatives, because I don't like Senator Udall's 30 by 30 initiative, which is 30% federal lands put off limits by 2030. And Deb Haaland, your congresswoman there, is also high on the list. She has, well, she does not have the experience necessary on public lands. She does not understand public lands issues very well. But, you know, as a Native American, she's a very attractive candidate. Hopefully, we are working to put forward other Native American alternatives, you know, but she is being discussed, as is your other Senator Martin Heinrich. I think he would be better than Tom Udall, certainly. But those are really the ones I've heard so far.
What about Representative Pelosi? Do you think she'll still keep as the speaker? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, that's not even
Not
so
negotiable.
the
Okay.
37 members of Congress who challenged her in 2018, they have largely lost their seats because they were those moderates that lost a lot of races. So there are very few of them left. And plus they all learned that Pelosi has too much power. You can't unseat her. Now, might she not be the party's lead in Congress after the 2022 election when the Democrats lose the majority, which is the likely scenario? Yes, she could finally be voted out then, but I wouldn't even count her out in that scenario.
Okay, and someone also had a question. Any hope for Colorado? Are we California bound?
No, there is no hope for Colorado. I am sorry. This election that was so moderating from the top of, New Hampshire's both houses in their legislature flipped. Democrats were hoping to flip House or Senate. They were hoping to flip legislatures in Pennsylvania, Florida, North Carolina. None of them flipped for them. But Colorado is a solid blue state. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we probably should have figured that out in 2018. We already saw the tsunami then. With Cory Gardner losing by, I think it was 8 points. So he outperformed Trump, but he was just too tied for Trump. So the Republicans do have a chance in 2022 against Michael Bennet. He's a very, he's kind of like a Tom Udall. You don't even know he's there. He fades into the background. He's not a major force in the Senate, but he's able to hang on to his race. I think Gardner could probably beat him with Trump not on the ticket, but I don't know if Gardner has the stomach to go for another round. But simply put, Republicans lost even more in Colorado this election cycle. I don't see anything really changing in Colorado for a while. The only good thing in Colorado is we continue to vote down tax increases. And in fact, we even voted in a tax decrease on the sales tax, and we submitted fees to Tabor. So the government, when they have to, constantly go to the voter on Tabor and because of Tabor, and always have to request tax increases. What the governments have been doing is just changing everything from a tax to a fee, and they can no longer do that. So we do have that moderating influence of Tabor. We continue to vote down tax increases and huge hikes for spending and education. But when it comes to Republicans winning in this state, it's not going to happen for a couple of cycles. So.
Okay, and another question here. The economic study that you mentioned that is going to be happening in Wyoming, is there an economic and environmental study that compares the impact of electric batteries, wind, solar, compared to oil and natural gas?
No, we will just be looking at the ban on leasing and fracking on federal lands. Okay. Now, I know this is a favorite topic because people bring this up to me all the time. I know, and you know, that wind and solar have a huge environmental impact that nobody talks about. Wind and solar and car batteries, they take huge amounts of mining that nobody wants to talk about. But that's not a fight for our industry. I mean, it's just not something that we're going to necessarily engage in because it would require literally hundreds of millions of dollars in PR to help Americans connect the dots between those realities and wind and solar and car batteries. I know it doesn't make sense. You know it doesn't make sense. You know that a car that is electric, or it's an electric car, but it runs on coal and natural gas. But trying to convince the public is very difficult, and it would take huge amounts of resources that certainly Western Energy Alliance doesn't have. Even working together, which we do with all of the trade associations all across the country, from API on down, there's not a stomach to spend the amount of money it takes to convince the public and change the public's mind on something that big. We don't even spend enough money in public relations as a whole industry, just convincing the public on what a huge benefit oil and natural gas is in their lives. So I know we can all gripe about it, but it's not something, it's something that the moderation in this election helps us to ensure doesn't pass in Congress. Those net zero proposals, the radical Green New Deal that would just pour billions, if not trillions, into energy efficiency and car battery and wind and solar, those aren't going to happen. So that's the best we're going to get for the next couple of years.
Okay.
Hope I answered that question, but I get it all the time. I do. I share your pain. I do understand the reality of wind, solar, and car batteries. But we have to just deal with a Congress that those aren't going anywhere. We're not going to convince the public otherwise, but that's where we are. Sorry.
And California has been a pretty good poster child for what happens when you go renewable.
Yep.
The third world type of place they are with the brownouts. I mean, anyone who's been to a third world country or parts of Europe where you don't have power, that they just don't have the generation. Whereas
that's why they're coming to Colorado and New Mexico and Georgia and Texas, and that's why they're changing the nature of the electorate.
Yeah, so
they don't want to stay in their unlivable state.
We have a few more minutes and a couple more questions here on existing existing NEPA fixes. How many outstanding are there, and is there going to be resolution to any of them? I had a personal interest in one in the Santa Fe Forest and east side of the San Juan Basin. I was just curious if you had any reports on how those, usually they were small little fixes that the BLM would work on.
Well, I don't know about small little fixes on that particular one, but I do think we'll get the Carlsbad out. I do think we'll get the Converse County Oil and Gas EIS out in Wyoming. Some of the big ones, they will get done right. I mean, I think we're going to get a lot of Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve announcements of rules being finalized and NEPA documents being done, and that's all to the good. That's great. I mean, they are, you have to hand it to the folks at Interior. The political appointees have done a lot under a lot of pressure and without a lot of resources in terms of they've gotten resistance at every step, not just from Congress and internally. So they have gotten so much done. They will get a bunch done before the end of the year. Not everything. I mean, obviously the Farmington EIS is not going to get done. That got wrapped up in politics between Secretary Bernhardt and Senator Heinrich. That's not going to get done.
The RMPA is not going to get done. Resource Management Plan.
No, I don't see that. I mean, the comment period just ended, what, at the end of September or something?
Because of COVID, I think, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I just don't see that one. And really, Bernhardt didn't want to touch that because of his agreement with Heinrich. So we are not going to get
What's that going to do to the city law? I mean, are we just going to have to go through regular APDs and go through that kind of slog? And if Biden does do item number 2, which you say start doing some studies, how long, I mean, we'll have an APD that's going to sit there for a year or so. And what about leases that are expiring? What about plans we have? Will they just have to be suspended? Would that be what we're going to have to do is suspend leases?
Yeah, if they're going to hold up leasing because they're finishing up RMPs or whatever, then yes, they should suspend those. And BLM's pretty good about suspending those when it's their NEPA that takes a long time. I know that's not a great answer, but I think it's the reality of a Biden administration. And that's why we do need to be prepared. And that's why Western Energy Alliance has a legal defense fund. We spend $500,000 a year on litigation because we are defending every single lease that has been sold since 2015. We are in court in about 5 different cases. We just won our case in New Mexico defending that record $972 million lease sale in New Mexico, but it's being appealed. So we have to spend resources protecting that win. So Western Energy Alliance is literally in court defending virtually every single lease sold since 2015. That litigation does stand us in good rights for what the Biden administration is going to throw at us, because we have gotten some good rulings. We got some good rulings when we beat back the hydraulic fracking rule and the venting and flaring rule. Those precedents will help us as we fight against the Biden administration, but it is going to take resources. So we do appreciate those of you who are members of Western Energy Alliance who give to our legal defense fund. If you're not and you have any federal assets or leases, please consider joining the Alliance. Please consider helping us fund the Legal Defense Fund, because we are literally protecting your valid existing lease rights. Whether or not you have a lease that is at issue in the litigation that we're defending, our defense of valid existing lease rights will enable you to fight against them holding up your permit. And we'll be involved in that litigation, but holding up your permit or holding up your leasing into the future. Because if we don't support and defend those valid existing lease rights now, then it's easier for the Biden administration, for the Biden administration. I think I said
Biden. That's a good name. Biden. I like that.
It will be, we will use those precedents to help us defend against those leasing bans and the like. So it requires resources, and we are there in the fight on behalf of industry all across the West.
Oh, good. Well, my conversation with the Farmington field, he's assistant field manager of the Farmington Office of Minerals, and he thought that the RMPA was going to be approved and ready to go. He said that. So I'm sorry he's not here that we could talk about it.
I hope that's the case. I would be really disappointed if I expected it and then it didn't happen.
Right, so right. You've lowered your expectations. Yeah. And then he thought that the category exclusions were good because those would make things easier, so we don't have to do big NEPA studies and EAs going forward. And
I'm glad you brought that up. That is the first case I won at Western Energy Alliance. That's the first case we got involved in, is defending those categorical exclusions.
CADX, right. And he also said they're having trouble with personnel at the BLM office because of COVID. The state is in red alert shutdown. of course, San Juan County has had it really bad. So just to give an update on that, maybe in January or next month, we can get it from the horse's mouth, but we might have to get higher up approval for that, because they bailed yesterday afternoon as we were getting ready to do this. So I think we'll wrap up here, Kathleen. Really appreciate it, and your questions you've answered. I'll send some others that people sent along to you, and I will try to include those in that too. So
great. Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate it, and thanks everyone
yes,
for your questions.
Finally, just want to say thanks for everyone for attending. People have been asking me where I get the idea to have this San Juan IQ webinar, and well, as a card-carrying introvert, it really helps me to get outside of myself and to put it out there. So that's really helpful for me. And it's also, I just thought it was really a good way to share my knowledge and love and excitement for the oil and gas industry, and in the only basin I've been in for 40 years. So that's one of the reasons I've done it. And at the beginning of the year, my wife and I put this 20 for 20, or 20 aspirational things that they're not like resolutions, but one of them was get to know one new person each week. So we did this in January, and I think I've gotten to know some new people either by email, or sometimes I've had lunch with people, gotten together with them for coffee afterwards. And so that's been one of those things I thought I'd share with the group. It's been a really good experience. Next month, we are tentatively going to have a crude oil takeaway webinar focusing on the loss of the Ceniza refinery in Gallup, what the ramifications have been for that, and how oil is moving out of the San Juan. So we have some guests on that. And then we're looking also for, the BLM has said they're going to meet with us on leasing state office people in January. So we'll see how that goes. We may slip something else in there with what some of the ramifications are for the election, but I'll keep you guys posted on that. So thank you very much. Have a great day. Thanks again, Kathleen. Really appreciate it. We will talk with you all later. Bye.